Hello my dear friends, welcome back to the channel and welcome to this little introduction to Blazor combined with Tailwind CSS. First, a short disclaimer, I am not a designer and I am also not a Tailwind expert. I'm really a beginner regarding Tailwind CSS, but maybe this is still then a good way to learn, because from beginner to beginner, you know, maybe I can explain this a bit better than being an absolute pro and then going back to this newbie level. I think you get the idea. Now, what we're going to do is really just install a Tailwind CSS and see how to work with that. Maybe a little explanation what Tailwind really is, but I do not want to go way too deep into that. For that, there's the documentation. You can read what utility classes are, what the utility first approach really is. But what I want to do here is provide a jump start for you, meaning we install Tailwind and then already use the utility classes in a Blazor project. And how would that actually work? And the, for me, most important part really, how can you use pre-built, well, not components, actually, it's just pre-built design elements, DOM elements with Tailwind and use them then in your Blazor applications. I think you know what I mean. Again, I am not an expert at this. If you have questions or you know more, then please write them down in the comment section. But then again, newbie to newbie, maybe this is the best way to learn. And if you learn something, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button, maybe even subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for that. And maybe you want to check out my newsletter for more .NET and Blazor stuff. And now let's start with this quick start guide. So I created a Blazor empty solution here, Blazor WebAssembly empty template it is. And when we run this, this is everything we see here, right? And we can even strip this down a bit further. For instance, I don't want this error message here, so save that. Restart the application. Again, we get the hello world and the loading screen. This is everything I want so far. And now regarding installing Tailwind, please don't stop the video here. I want to use and recommend the CLI. There's the Tailwind CLI you can use. And for that, you need Node.js. I know, we're using Blazor here, .NET. We really don't want to use anything JavaScript related, right? But sorry about that. It's still, I think, the best way, as far as I know, to use Tailwind. So please, Node.js it is, just Google for it, and then download the Windows installer, and then you can leave this page again. But then, when you got this installed, you open this folder in the File Explorer here, the client folder, if you want, of the Blazor client project. And here then we simply open the terminal and have to enter some stuff. And the first thing is npx, again, I know, and then Tailwind CSS init. Now, we're not using npm, maybe you heard the term already, but npx, the big difference is we don't get a Node modules folder, which is typical for, well, Node.js apps. And I guess you don't want that, a Node modules folder. And I certainly don't want that. So npx uses something like a cache on your machine. And if you've already downloaded Tailwind, then it'll use it from what you have downloaded, but it won't add anything to your actual project. So this is great. Just run this. And if you haven't downloaded Tailwind, it would now ask you to download it, but in my case, it already did. So now you see it created a Tailwind CSS config file for me. This is the very first thing that is happening. And here at root level, we now see this Tailwind config.js. Now, regarding the config file, we want to tell Tailwind where to look for the used Tailwind utility classes. So in the case of Blazor, and by the way, I will talk a little bit about the utility classes in a minute, but in the case of Blazor, where it should look now, these would be Razor and HTML files. So here in the content array, we add the following. We just want Tailwind to look for every Razor and HTML file through the complete structure of this project. And this then would look like that. I hope this should work. And with that, we now create an input CSS file, right? There we will enter a little stuff, and then Tailwind then will compile this into an output CSS file. And this is also why we need the terminal here with npx, Node.js, and so on. But don't worry, in the final product, then you don't need that anymore. You've got your final style sheet CSS file, so you don't have to worry about that at all. But here now, let's just create a new folder first. Call that styles maybe, and here we add a new item and call this app CSS. All right, remove the body element here. And now here we will add 3 directives. So first one would be Tailwind and then base. The next is Tailwind components. And already the last one is Tailwind utilities. That's the one. Now we need these directives to make Tailwind work in essence. Utilities are the utility classes of Tailwind. With injecting base, we make sure that everything works across different browsers, for instance. And with components, we can use the add apply directive, for instance, which makes sure that certain styles will be applied for every element you want. We will also make use of that, for instance, for the H1 or H3 tags. All right, so I think that's too much for the beginning. So let's just make sure you've added these 3 directives if you're coding this along with me. And now with that, we want to compile this input file into an output file. For that, we go back to the terminal, and here now we enter npx tailwind CSS again, but now we write -i for input file, and this thing can be found in styles, and then app CSS, and we want to use the following output file, www.root CSS, and then app CSS. And then the great thing is we can also add some kind of hot reload with --watch. I'm not hitting enter, but you can already see we've got this app CSS file here, right? And this will now be overridden. So let's just hit return and see it here rebuilding. And as you can see, it is warning us that no utility classes were detected in our source files. If this is unexpected, double check the content option. All right. Well, so far there's not much going on actually, but you see that the app CSS file has been changed, right? So now we've got all these classes here, not classes, but regarding the elements, we've got some CSS stuff happening here. All right. So that's that. I would say we save that if not everything has been saved, and then we should see, nope, it's not rebuilding, but when we now, I don't know, for instance, in the app Razor, just hit save. Yeah, it is rebuilding and it's done. Okay, so now you see hot reload is actually working. And with that, we could already change some stuff now. So for instance, let's go to the pages and then index Razor. So now here's only hello world. Thing is, we just start with class and then we enter anything we want. But first, maybe we just check out how this page now looks. So let's open it again. And here you see it already looks a little bit different, right? And we can inspect this thing to see, okay, font size inherit. Now we go to compute it. And here we see the font family is now UI Sans. And we can go there. Where is this coming from? From our generated app CSS. And here we see in HTML, this is our font family. All right, this is nice, but now I want to change that. The first thing I want to change is I want to make this an H3, because when we create new pages, then by default, these are also H3s. So now let's go back here. Nothing really changed, right? Okay. But now let's say I want to make this look a bit differently. For instance, we want to make this bold, make the text a bit bigger. So what we can do now is we can use the utility classes from Tailwind CSS. So here we write class and then font, extra bold, for instance, text is a bit bigger. So text dash 5XL. And let's just say that's already it. So let's go back and we already see that's the result. I think this already looks nice, but when we do that, right, you see that you have to know this stuff. You have to know what classes exist, and this is the stuff you have to learn when you want to use Tailwind CSS. But then again, when you use Bootstrap, which is here by default, when you're not using the empty template here in Blazor, then you just have to know the Bootstrap classes, right? And if you don't know them, you have to look them up. If you want to use plain CSS, then you also have to learn CSS. So I think there's not a big difference here to other libraries, let's say the older libraries, the old style of libraries where you have already finished classes for you, right? So the great advantage then here is that I see utility classes, as we're using here, are meant to only change a little of your element, meaning when you are creating a button, for instance, with Bootstrap, right? And you would see a button down here. What you would usually do is you create a button like that. So I am a button. And then here you would say something like class and then btn and then btn primary, for instance, right? Again, you have to know this, and you also have to know how this thing then looks. Now here, of course, we have no Bootstrap, so this looks like that. Great thing is it looks like actually like nothing. There is no change in here, right? Now with the approach of Tailwind and this utility first approach, meaning we have classes that only change the single styles, as you can see here with the H3, is that you know how this thing will look in the end, right? Because you see what you're actually changing here in the markup. But of course, if you want to learn that and use that, you have to go to Tailwind CSS and then maybe to the documentation. And here then, when you scroll further down, there's lots and lots of stuff like the padding, for instance. So what we can do here, as you can see, these are the classes for the paddings. So let's just go back here and let's say we want to add the padding to something like that. And then let's go back to our application and just put the tab here. And you see we already have a little padding here. Nice. So this seems to work. Now, what about a border? I think there's a border. And now we can go to border style. And then you see here already that you've got some examples. Now, the thing is, when you're lazy as me and you don't want to really learn every single class here and think, well, isn't there something similar to a component library, something similar to Bootstrap maybe, where we got already components that look nice and that we kind of just can copy? Well, of course, there is something like that here for you. And you can just go to components, and then you see we get to Tailwind UI, and these are the buttons, for instance. We've got a slider here, lots of stuff we can already use. Problem is, this is not for free. All right, so when you want to, for instance, go to application UI, and then we've got let's see, way further down, navigation, elements, then you go to buttons and you see, okay, this is a button that looks nice. You go to get the code and then you have to pay for that stuff. All right. So that's a bummer, but of course there are other solutions out there for you. And I just want to show you some of them. Now I've got Mamba UI, which is when you go to the main page, kickstart your next website in minutes. Mamba UI is a free open source collection of UI components and templates based on Tailwind CSS. Great stuff. So browse free components, we go to button, and then you see this is a basic button. And now we go to HTML and we see, oh great, this is a perfectly fine button. We can just copy this and then we go back to our app And paste this down here. And we have this basic button here. All right, so this already works. Another library is HyperUI, for instance. Pretty similar stuff, right? You've got alerts, badges, and so on. And another one would be Flowbyte. And really, I'm not related to any of these. I just found them in my short research, and I really like them. And I especially liked that this is usable for free. Now regarding Flowbyte, there is some stuff you have to pay for, but you can also just go to the docs and again, just to the buttons, for instance. And here again, you see the default button. We can also see how this will look in the smartphone mode or the tablet mode, whatever. And again, let's just copy the classes here, right? And then go back to our code. And then here we say, this is now our button. Remove this button here, save that. And we go back, and here's now our default button. And I forgot to remove something. Okay, and now this should look better. Yep, that's great. What I don't like is the padding here or spacing here actually of the complete page. So maybe we can fix that as well. Let me just go back to the app, to the main layout. And here we can, for instance, say class. Already got that, right? Margin in the x-axis, let's say 4. And this looks a bit better, I think. So now we've got this button here. This is great. But now when we do it like that, the big question arises, well, now we changed the style of the button, right? So these are a lot of classes that we have to use here. The text is white, all right. We understand what this is doing, right? BG background blue 700, okay. On hover, we've got a blue background with a shading of 800. On focus, we've got the ring, right? We can see that this works, but do I really have to write all these classes or copy and paste them whenever I want to use a button? Well, this is the great thing now. When you're using Blazor, you can of course create a component out of that. So let's do that real quick together. So we just add a new folder first. Call this shared again, and here we just add a razor component. Call this my button, for instance. And now we go back to the index razor. Copy this whole stuff. Put this here. And now the beautiful thing is, of course, this now will be our text parameter. And I hope you know that already. And here on click, we will also use an event callback here on click. All right, so here now we just add a property, which is a string, and that'll be the text. Let's just say by default, this is, well, simply button. And now also another property, which is an event callback. And this is called on click, and both are parameters. All right, like that. And now we should have our component. And now in the index, we just say my button. Maybe we import that or add that to the imports here. So using like that, now we can go back, my button, great. And here now we say the text is I'm button again. And on click, we call our click me function that we will write in a sec. Okay, we add our code block. And now let's say void click me, and here we simply console log something. I was clicked. Great. Let's restart that. And hopefully we see this thing again. We can click on this and it works. Great stuff, right? And now this is really, really clean. And we only have the classes here. And we also see directly how this thing looks. We can change it. We don't have to use any CSS files. So far, I really like that. Now, another thing I told you was actually applying these classes to elements, these H3 elements by default. How would you do that? Now, real quick, don't forget the .NET Web Academy opens soon again for enrollment. Maybe you want to check it out. In there, we dive deep into building web applications with .NET, meaning a .NET Web API, Entity Framework, Azure, Git, and on the front end, of course, Blazor WebAssembly. So maybe you want to check it out. Thanks a lot for considering. The link is in the video description. And now let's continue. Well, this is also pretty simple. What you can do here in the config file now is simply add this element. This is in essence not a CSS class, right? This is only the element here. And now we grab this and we don't have to add the class here. Add this now to our H1 element in the input file, and we use the directive apply. All right. So now let's save that. We go back here and hopefully when you use the correct element here, it should, yep, now hot reload worked. It changes that thing. And now when we open or create a new page, by default, the title is H3, then you will see that this will also work. Let's just say we add a new Razor component and we call this about, for instance. And this is also a page. So the link is then about. We restart the application. So here's our index in essence. When we now go to the about page, we see this also works just fine. And you see we haven't added any classes here. All right, great stuff. So we covered this with components. We covered the apply directive, right? And now the last thing that I want to show you, and that was a question that I really had. Now, what about actually designing, right? So what we see here in this empty Blazor template, well, we see the hello world text, we see the button. This is nice, we can use it. But now I really want to build something with a navigation bar, right? How would you do that? Well, I just went again to Flowbyte in this case. Again, you can also go to Mamba UI, Hyper UI, whatever you want to use. You just Google for some free component libraries, or if you want to pay something, of course, you can go to Tailwind UI and get that then. But let's just stick with Flowbyte in this little example here. And you've got a mega menu, for instance, that you can really use, and also simply a navigation bar here. And as you can see, okay, because of the zoom here, we actually don't see. Yeah, now we see the actual menu. And again, now we can toggle the mobile view and the tablet view. So here we even got the toggler. Now I can already tell you that the toggle button here won't work out of the box. So we would have to code something here, but maybe you can just copy and paste that from the default Blazor template. But again, what I really like is actually the look, and we can simply again copy this. So let's just copy the whole thing. And now we go back to our project, and here we've got the main layout. Now we could of course create another layout file, but it doesn't really matter because it's only about the navigation up here. And now what do we have here? Well, lots and lots of classes, of course. We also have the Flowbyte logo here, but maybe we can change that. And let's just say this is my app, remove the logo. And regarding the URL, well, let's just go to the index page. And now down here, we have lots of links, but let's just say we want to have a link for the about page. And this is also already called about. This is great. And now also here, this is the home page. Let's just have a look and go back. And here we already see great stuff, right? We have a navigation bar with the home link and also the about link. This is really, really great. And it really doesn't stop here, because now what we can do is, when we have a look here again, let's just go to the mega menus, for instance, and they have great examples here with even a separated button for the login and signing up. And I think there was also stuff with avatars and yep, that was, see that? I just love this. So you have the images here of the user that is probably currently logged in. Of course, you have to code still lots of stuff then. But again, just regarding the design, there's already lots of stuff that you can use. I really can only recommend to have a look at Tailwind and then the free component libraries to design your page, make your Blazor page look differently, and not having this purple gradient on the left with the sidebar. This is just great stuff in my opinion, and I will definitely continue playing around with Tailwind. And if you want more tutorials about Tailwind, going a bit deeper, maybe you have questions, then please tell me that in the comments. I'd love to create another video for you. And if you like this one, maybe you also like the ones you currently see on the screen. Would really love to see you in another video. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Take care.